Hi, everybody. We're all very glad to see you today. So many of you have come out. It's just lovely. Right at the moment, we are waiting for David Delk to join us. He is going to present to us today, as are Cathy and Lloyd. That's Lloyd Marbett and Cathy Chudy. David is a board member here at UUJEC's Peace, Equity, and Climate Task Force, and we are really delighted that he organized bringing Lloyd and Cathy in, and he's going to talk about the present status of nuclear weapons as we move closer to midnight in terms of the doomsday clock.
Oh, you did. It's very good.
Are you here, David?
I didn't look. You can tell.
So David received his bachelor's of science degree in sociology from Portland State University, and he's on the phone. So hold on a second, and I'm going to speak to him. Hey, David.
What I have.
He's not able to get in. Terry. Terry, do you want to try to help him get in, and we'll go ahead and start with Lloyd and Catherine?
Okay. I
Is that
can't
gonna
help
work?
him because I'm the host and it's my account. I don't get any of the sign-in information.
Okay, all right. So he can't help you with that. Is Sally online?
Not yet, but I'll text her and ask her to share whatever with David. And then
Okay.
then I'll mute so you don't get random conversations.
I can go off and send him how I got in, if that's useful.
Okay, Lucy, do you have David's number? Can you call him?
No, I'll send him an email.
Okay, David, Lucy's going to send you an email, okay?
Okay, very good. I'm on my email right now.
She's on his email right now. Okay.
Okay.
Great. And
It'll
if
take me.
there's a code that I need to enter, please include that.
There's no code. I'll send you the.
There's no code.
Okay, very good then. I'll watch for email.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was introducing David, and he'll be with us very soon. So we'll switch our organization around to how we're going to do this today. And we're going to start with Lloyd Marbett and Cathy Chudy. And they are going to address nuclear power, unaffordable at any size. Uh, they will speak to us on why nuclear energy is not a clean energy solution to the climate crisis. And their presentation will also cover implications of regulatory oversight changes, as well as atomic convergence of data centers, AI, and nuclear power. So Lloyd has worked as an anti-nuclear activist since 1972 in both Oregon and Washington. He's executive director of the Oregon Conservancy Foundation since 1992, working to keep fossil fuels in the ground, opposing the resurgence of nuclear power and its small modular nuclear reactors, SMNR designs, and promoting the use of clean, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy conservation. Catherine is a retired mental health therapist and a longtime climate activist, a member of the Oregon Conservancy Foundation's board of directors, and associate producer of the documentary film Atomic Bamboozle, the false promise of a nuclear renaissance. So I see you're ready to go, Lloyd. I'll turn it over to you.
Actually, we'll turn it over to Cathy, just for
Okay, then.
our beginning.
Are you ready, Cathy?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. We want to thank Unitarian Universalists for a just economic opportunity, for inviting us here, and to thank all of you for providing us this opportunity to share why nuclear power is unaffordable at any size. And we'll start with Lloyd.
So the beginning of our slide presentation begins with the nuclear fuel cycle. And the importance of examining the nuclear fuel cycle is become quite significant because there has been changes in state laws, and also the federal government seems to be pushing this as well, to make nuclear power clean. But the only way that they measure that cleanliness is in the fuel cycle itself. And this graphic is a depiction of that fuel cycle. It begins with uranium mining, and the uranium that's being mined is made up of two radioactive isotopes. One is uranium-235, and the other is uranium-238. The fissionable isotope is uranium-235, but if you have the ore, uranium ore in your hand, only 2% of that is going to be uranium-235. The rest, 98%, is uranium-238. So in order to use uranium as a fuel, they has to go through a milling process, an enrichment process, and uh, fuel fabrication. And so what they do in the milling process is they break down the ore. In the processing part of it, they turn that into a slurry, and then that also makes it into ultimately a gas, and they're able to enrich it by concentrating the uranium-235 that's naturally in the ore up to 5% for conventional nuclear reactors. And for the advanced reactors, they're now pushing that up to 20%. Which, by the way, it's just below 20%. If above that, you're now getting into weapons grade uranium. And of course, the concern about advanced reactors is that they are going to exacerbate the nuclear proliferation problem, which David is hopefully going to talk about. Anyway, once they get to the fuel fabrication, of course, then you have to go to the nuclear plant. And of course, the nuclear plant has to be constructed, and they don't do that with nuclear electricity, and nor do they decommission it when the plant has reached the end of its life. And after they have fissioned the uranium, that, of course, comes to the radioactive waste disposal problem, which, by the way, is full circle because the uranium mines themselves are radioactive. This is considered to be low-level radiation, but we have in the United States currently in the West 10,000 abandoned uranium mines, which have yet to be completely cleaned up. And so that also is part of the waste disposal problem. And except for power production, quantifiable CO2 emissions are created throughout the nuclear fuel cycle. It also creates nuclear waste, the need to transport radioactive materials, unforeseen nuclear accidents, in-life decommissioning, radioactive contamination, and nuclear proliferation risks. Of course, the problem with radiation, ionizing radiation, is it comes in three forms, and we can talk more about that. But the thing that is, I think you need to focus on here, this is a depiction, of course, of the kinds of radioactive isotopes that are produced from fissioning and where they affect the human body. That's the picture of the woman and the organs in her body that are affected by this. The bottom lower picture, of course, points to the most significantly impacted creatures, which are fetuses, and then, of course, the woman herself, and then this radiation is a perfect industrial pollutant. You can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't touch it or smell it. Once exposed, you can't easily prove health effects because there's a latency period when you're exposed. The actual health effect can create over a period of time later, and that makes it difficult to identify where it comes from. Also, there's no safe level of radiation exposure. except the Trump administration is pushing to raise allowable radiation exposure from as low as reasonably achievable to below regulatory concern. And there's a quote that I think I have long subscribed to from Albert Schweitzer about uh, the permissible amount of radiation. And the quote goes, "We are constantly being told about a permissible amount of radiation. Who is permitting it? Who has any right to permit it?" And I think he hit the nail on the head, because all of this over time has lent to the health effects that has been generated by this technology. An example of that is the nuclear plant, the only nuclear plant that has operated, a commercial nuclear plant that has operated in Oregon, and that's Oregon's Trojan nuclear plant. In the year 2000, that was 7 years, the Trojan plant prematurely closed, and the next slide will discuss that briefly. Joseph J. Mangano of the Radiation and Public Health Project published a health study, Improvements in Local Infant Health After Nuclear Power Reactor Closing. It documented infant mortality rates around Trojan and 4 other nuclear plants, both during their operation and after each plant closed. Upon closure, infant deaths decreased at all 5 nuclear plant locations. And again, the NRC has discontinued doing these studies. So really what's happening is the public is subjected to the normal, Trojan didn't have an accident. These are regular radiation releases that take place from the plant, gaseous releases most likely, and all of that has an impact. And this is how it's being identified. But again, the nuclear industry has been very good at suppressing or attempting to dispute any particular study that's done that shows there is an impact. Now, the legacy of Trojan is broader than just the amount of radiation it's produced over time. In the Trojan plant began operation in 1975, and it ended operation in 1993. And that was because Trojan steam generators failed after operating only 18 years of a 40-year license. They had 40 years to operate Trojan. PGE closed Trojan down with 790 high-level radioactive fuel assemblies in its spent fuel pool, but they didn't have anywhere to go. And so what they did was in 2003, 10 years after the plant closed, they put all of the spent fuel into 34 dry casks on site at Trojan's independent spent fuel storage installation. You see a picture of that at the bottom of the slide. Those are the dry casks. They're sitting outside waiting for the government to come get the waste. And of course, the reason why they can't is because there is no permanent federal high-level radioactive waste depository that exists for any U.S. nuclear power plant in the country. And so we're just accumulating and accumulating this waste, which really kind of reminds me of Pete Seeger's song, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, and the big fool said, push on. We keep pushing on into this technology without really any accountability. And that is more than the problem. What the government is now attempting to do, even though the goal has always been to have a geologic repository deep in the ground, what they're coming up with is interim storage facilities in New Mexico and Texas. This is an Art Cobb cartoon, which I altered to show you the imaginary look of what these interim storage facilities are going to look like. We still don't have them. They're in the licensing phase. They're being opposed in both New Mexico and Texas. And the thing that I think we need to be concerned about here is that, these are we live in unstable times. We all know what's happening right now. The world has lots of wars and disputes that seem to get resolved with weapons. And it kind of reminds me when I was a kid in school, there was, I was taught that there was the war between Carthage and Rome back in ancient times, and these were two seafaring entities that competed against each other, and eventually they went to war. Rome prevailed, and when they won the war, what they did was is they went to Carthage and they tilled salt into the soil so that the Carthaginians would never be able to rebuild their cities or feed themselves. And it's kind of the same thing here. I mean, this is an open target. And I'm hoping that we never see something like that. But in the licensing proceedings that I have participated in, this kind of thing was never considered because it was in the responsibility of the military, and none of that was discussed in the licensing proceedings. So now we go to X Energy at Hanford, and I give you my participant, your co-participant, to take this on because she has taken this on directly.
So next slide, please. So X Energy is a private American nuclear reactor and design company with headquarters in Rockland, Maryland. And they have signed a development agreement with Energy Northwest at Hanford. Energy Northwest is a consortium of public power, municipal and public utility districts in the state of Washington, and they operate the Columbia Generating Station, which is the only nuclear power plant that's operating in the Pacific Northwest. Energy Northwest and X Energy signed a joint development agreement in 2023 for an XE100 advanced small modular reactor project. And this proposes to have up to 12 XE100 helium-cooled pebble bed reactors that would be developed adjacent to Energy Northwest Columbia Nuclear Generating Station. So it would be adding additional nuclear waste to that site. The XE100 uses a new enriched up to 20% HALEU fuel, which by up to 20%, it's just short of the major proliferation risk with highly enriched uranium. HALEU fuel is a reactor. The XE100 is a reactor design that is seeking NRC approval. It has not gotten approval yet. The timeline keeps moving longer and longer, and it has no operating history, and its actual costs are unknown.
And I would
Next
point
slide,
out on this
please.
slide
Yes.
that what you see on the left part of the slide, that a hand holding what appears to be a cue ball, is actually one of the pebbles that are inside this, above it, the schematic of the reactor itself. Those pebbles drop down. They're a ceramic. They hold in the enriched uranium, which is, as I said, just below weapons grade level.
So these advanced reactors, which are still not approved in terms of their designs, except for one, and certainly not XE100 from X Energy, are extremely expensive. And so Energy Northwest set out to find funding for what they call a feasibility study. So they started with public utilities in the Pacific Northwest and were able to get close to $1 million from 18 Washington state utilities, public utility districts, co-ops, and municipalities. They also were able to secure $10 million from Puget Sound Energy, which is an investor-owned private utility, for future energy offtake with no further financial obligations at the time. And when they signed that agreement, that still wasn't enough to move forward. So in 2024, last fall, Amazon Corporation stepped up, offering $334 million for 4 of those X Energy reactor modules that would power data centers and AI in Eastern Oregon, not in Washington, provided that they remain the major contributor and there are no other off-takers who can approve it or pay for it. So given that the expenses continue to rise, the Energy Northwest was successful at getting our Washington State Legislature to pony up $25 million in a 2024 Washington State budget appropriation. This was opposed by local environmental groups, Columbia Riverkeeper, the Sierra Club, 350 Seattle, and a number of groups, as well as the budget appropriation is from clean energy funds. So there are a lot of people who are uncomfortable in Washington, a number of people who are uncomfortable applying clean energy funds to a proposed nuclear reactor, considering what Lloyd said earlier, it's not a clean technology. And then finally, the end goal of this at this point is for the Amazon money to allow Energy Northwest to pursue loan guarantees, federal taxpayer loan guarantees from the loan guarantee office. And it could be up to 80% of the project costs. There would still need to be investment of the remaining 20%. And ultimately, if this project fails and doesn't come online to operate, we, the taxpayers, would end up repaying if Energy Northwest can't repay. So again, this shows rising costs, and essentially the public are involved in this and could end up holding the liability for the costs. And the end use is at this point not considered affordable for the public utilities in Washington. None of them have been either invited to, well, they've been invited to, but at this point we're being told that it's too expensive for us to invest in this first of a kind project. Next slide, please. So the economist David Schlissel of the International Energy Economics and Financial Analysis Institute, he's retired from that outfit now, but at the time he did this study, he was their director of resource analysis. He identified key small modular reactor risks and warning signs that show why it's not a good bet for energy and also for climate change. So none of the designs currently are being marketed. None of them that are being marketed have been built. They're not good tools for fighting climate change. They're too expensive and they take too long to build. The only one that's gotten certification with qualifications from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is NuScale, and they had a model that tanked their stock price, and that was considered a warning sign for governments, utilities, ratepayers, and private investors. A key warning sign, and it's in red because this is really important, except for NuScale, small modular nuclear reactor vendors and potential buyers are refusing to make the estimated costs public. For example, TerraPower, X Energy, GE Hitachi, and Westinghouse, those costs are considered proprietary, and the public doesn't get to know how those costs are rising or what the eventual costs are going to be. Finally, we have increasing competition from the declining cost of renewable energy sources plus storage. So essentially, nuclear power will not be capable of addressing the need to replace fossil fuels in time to stop the catastrophic climate change tipping points that we're nearing and that we are already experiencing impacts from. We need major investment in conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy now. And it's a problem that the current administration is scaling back on or shutting down incentives and putting obstacles to us getting the kind of renewable energy, et cetera, that is available now. We could deploy it now and it'll lower emissions within this decade so that we can get a handle on climate change effects. Next slide, please. So I brought up the current administration. This bill actually, if you can go back, Lloyd, to the 2024 Advance Act. This is the accelerating deployment of versatile advanced nuclear for clean energy, which is an act that was passed in 2024. It was essentially a wish list for the industry and for pro-nuclear advocates. And at this point, the propaganda of the nuclear industry has been so successful that we have widespread bipartisan support across the country for passing something like this. Although it was a 93-page bill that was stuffed into a Fire and Safety Act, and it was passed in 2024 to, quote, modernize the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and to promote nuclear energy. So it greatly increases nuclear power risks by broadening the NRC's mandate from safety regulation to industry promotion, which is a 50-year step backwards. Back in 1974, Congress, concerned over the then Atomic Energy Commission's conflicting mandate of both regulating nuclear safety and promoting nuclear power, split the Atomic Energy Commission into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the United States Department of Energy. We've come full circle now to have the NRC now promoting nuclear, and along with the United States Department of Energy, which has major implications in terms of safety. This act also creates more radioactive waste using taxpayer dollars, adds more radioactive contamination in the United States and abroad, increases enrichment of uranium and proliferation risks, creates less regulatory oversight, and adds conflicting responsibilities, promotion along with regulating safety. And it exports more nuclear technology to other countries, as well as for the first time allowing foreign ownership over United States nuclear plant sites. Next slide, please. And then we have the hypocrisy of the Price-Anderson Act. In 1957, Congress passed the Price-Anderson Act, and available liability coverage at that time was only $60 million for nuclear power plants. And this was seen by electric utilities to be inadequate, and they were very hesitant to risk operating them. So we didn't have any being ordered or built. This act that was passed in 1957 partially compensates the nuclear industry by establishing a no-fault insurance system. So the first $15 billion as of 2021 is industry funded, and then any claims above that amount are covered by taxpayers. And in 2024, this was about to expire, and it was extended out to 2065 without public hearing, so no public input, forcing we the taxpayers to remain liable for nuclear accidents that reactor designers now assert won't happen. This is a so-called perfectly safe way for the nuclear industry to build their product, harm the public at taxpayer expense. And keep in mind that the estimates for the Fukushima disaster are now approaching $600 billion. So the amount of $15 billion is almost nothing in terms of how it would provide taxpayer assurance that they're not going to be having that kind of liability when there's an accident, a serious accident. Next slide, please. Which brings us around to the current administration, which is challenging and changing Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulations. Again, this is following the wish list of industry. They've lobbied heavily for these kinds of things. Currently, Last Energy, which is a microreactor developer, along with Texas and several other states, are challenging the Nuclear Regulatory Commission licensing of microreactors and small modular nuclear reactors. They're trying to make the case that because they're small, they don't carry the same risks, and therefore they shouldn't have the same safety arrangements required of them by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Small modular nuclear reactor startup companies are currently seeking exemptions from emergency planning and reactor containment. So also this kind of streamlining has carried over to environmental review, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is now moving into providing generic and not site-specific environmental review with the full approval and even push from the administration. Finally, the Trump executive orders that have happened over the last several months put nuclear power in the United States on steroids, and Lloyd's going to carry you through that. And we're going to talk about that later. So I'm going to turn this over to Lloyd. Thank you.
So now we're back to Oregon. In 1980, Oregon passed a ballot measure, a statutory ballot measure law, and it requires, before a commercial nuclear power plant can be built in Oregon, there has to be, number one, a permanent federally licensed repository for terminal disposition of its high-level nuclear waste. And number two, if such a repository exists, then a proposed nuclear plant must be put to a statewide vote of the people. This measure has, for 45 years, this law that we created by ballot, collecting signatures and putting it on the ballot, has kept no nuclear power plants from being built in Oregon. But there's a lot that's happened in the legislature since that time. Starting in 2015, and Oregon has two different kinds of legislative sessions. There's a full one that happens in odd number years, and then there's a short one that happens in even number years. And what you see here is what started happening in 2015, clear up to 2025. The number of bills that would in some way amend or repeal the ballot measure law has gone up significantly. In fact, it set a record in 2025. Now, fortunately, all those bills have died. And this is an account for the bills that came up in 2025 that explains what exactly they're proposing. On the House side, there were two bills they're out of the 13. There were two bills that actually got a hearing in front of the House Committee on Climate and Energy and Environment. HB 2038 directed the Oregon Department of Energy to study the advantages of nuclear energy, but not its disadvantages. Very clever, another way to try and slide this thing through without any real accountability or analysis for how nuclear power is actually operated. The other bill is HB 2410, and this one is one that was of great concern, and it also introduces a new participant in nuclear power plants. It created an exemption to the Oregon's 1980 ballot measure law without statewide voter approval. So it was going to change the law, but it wasn't going to put it to a vote, though there were measures on the Senate side that would have allowed at least that vote, and we'll get into that. Only Umatilla County, that's one county in Oregon. It's in eastern Oregon. It's very close to Washington State's Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which itself is a mess. It contains all the wastes that were produced during World War II in an attempt to develop the nuclear bomb. And those wastes have still yet to be fully cleaned up. And it would vote on creating, when the county, this small county voted, it would vote on creating a small modular nuclear reactor demonstration project with an unknown number of small modular nuclear reactors. You know, there's a real misnomer here, small modular nuclear reactors. What are we talking about here? We're talking about modules, but the way the modules actually work is they can be combined. In other words, one module, for example, NuScale has a module that's 75 megawatts, but you can combine 12 of those together. And if you do that, you reach a level of energy production that's very close to the large nuclear plants that are operating. And there's an irony here as well, because the small modular nuclear reactors actually produce more waste than do the large reactors. And again, because both of the bills were played, the 2410 bill was designed to help Umatilda's local cooperative to power AI data centers. And there's a terrible irony in that as well, because, initially the nuclear industry is opportunistic. And what they saw in climate, our concerns about catastrophic climate change, which the current president is now promoting as a hoax, they saw an opportunity to bring the nuclear industry back, even though, as Kath has shown in the Schlissel slide, the economic study that was done, renewables are far cheaper, they're far more available, and they're making a significant difference. So what has happened, though, is we now are in the new age of AI, or data centers, artificial intelligence and data centers. And the data centers are becoming big power demand creations. And because of it, this was used as an opportunity to create this exemption to do away with the 1980 ballot measure. And the only way we dodged this bullet ultimately, even though we had a really wonderful testimony, a lot of people participated, but because both of the bills placed a revenue requirement upon the state, they were referred to the Joint Ways and Means Committee, where they died due to an Oregon budget shortfall. We don't have enough money to go around in the state of Oregon right now to cover everybody's dreams about how they'd like to have taxpayer dollars spent. How long that's going to last, I don't know. But it opened the door to trying to take a look more closely at what's going on with artificial intelligence and data centers. In the Senate side, there were two bills, that HB 215 and 216, that would have repealed Oregon's 1980 ballot measure law outright. It would have done away with it. And the only difference between the bills is that one of them referred it out to a vote of the people before that actual repeal took place. The other bill is another example of the kind of thing that we confront here in Oregon. It would have directed Oregon State University to do a feasibility study on nuclear energy generation in Oregon. Now, Oregon State University has an inherent conflict of interest, as it is the original developer and proponent of NuScale small modular nuclear reactor design, and it holds an equity share in NuScale. It turned over the design to them, and in exchange, it ended up getting a share in NuScale. All three bills had a public hearing, but they died in committee after both the House bills that we just previously discussed passed out of committee. And we expect the House and Senate bills to be sponsored again in Oregon's next legislative session. You've already seen that this is an ongoing battle that's been going on every other year, and probably now we may face in every legislative session. And unlike past legislative sessions, we now face the financial influence and the lobbying of both the nuclear and the AI industrial complexes. And that brings us to something that we have never covered before, I have never covered before, and that's the atomic convergence between artificial intelligence and nuclear power. And I have attempted to do research on what we face with artificial intelligence and how it combines with nuclear power. The way these slides actually worked when they're done through PowerPoint, not through the Zoom window that we have here, is these quotes would come up separately. But I found it ironic in looking at the different things that have been said about AI, how much it matched the first quote that you see here on this slide. This is a quote that was made by Lewis Strauss, chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, in a 1954 speech to the National Association of Science Writers. And it's been a famous quote. In fact, my father used to talk about this. It is not too much to expect that our children will enjoy in their homes electric energy too cheap to meter. And that was the way nuclear power was sold. The early nuclear power plants, the large ones, were sold to the public. And of course, none of the meters. In fact, they used to say that they would take the meters off the house, but of course, none of that happened. Lo and behold, when I start to take a look at some of what's been said about artificial intelligence, I discover that Sam Altman, in the second quote down, he's the chief executive officer of OpenAI, said intelligence too cheap to meter is well within grasp. So, in other words, they're saying to us that, oh my gosh, we're going to have this wonderful world of artificial intelligence, and it's not really going to cost us anything. I doubt any meters will be taken off houses because of that. But it just goes to show you the kind of hype. And that, of course, I find in this quote from Joao Camargo, an environmental engineer and climate change researcher at the University of Lisbon, Portland. The AI hype is essentially propaganda, the main purpose of which is to accelerate layoffs, to fuel financial speculation, and to divert investment and resources toward a new jump into the abyss by economic and political elites. And then I discovered this article that contains what are called the 12 greatest dangers of AI. And it's a list created by an AI expert by the name of Gary Marcus, who's an author of a book called Taming Silicon Valley and How We Can Assure How that AI works for us. And in order to go through his list, which I think is really informative, you need to know about the definition of generative AI because he uses it in the list. It refers to the class of artificial intelligent models that generate new content, such as text, images, audio, and even code based on patterns and characteristics learned from existing data. And that existing data, by the way, is everything that's out there on the internet. These models are fed all kinds of documents that have been created over time in order to become the kind of information providers that they give. And let's look at what the immediate dangers of that are. One is deliberate and automated, mass-produced political disinformation, manipulating elections. And generative AI systems are, according to Gary again, the generative AI systems are the machine guns or nukes, ironic again, of disinformation. Then we have market manipulation. Bad actors won't just try to influence elections, they'll also try to influence markets. And then you have accidental information. Even when there is no intention to deceive, large language models can spontaneously generate accidental misinformation. And then you have defamation. A special case of misinformation is misinformation that hurts people's reputations, whether accidentally or on purpose. Then you have non-consensual deepfakes. Deepfakes are getting more and more realistic, and their use is increasing. In October 2023, some high school students started using AI to make non-consensual fake nudes of their classmates. I mean, it's crazy, but it's even getting worse. I mean, you're seeing political figures that deep fakes are being made out of, so that, again, they can be branded. And we, of course, are in a political administration that likes to do branding and falsely doing branding. It accelerates crime. The biggest impersonation scam so far seems to be revolved around voice cloning, where your voice can be used to be recorded and then can be used to get into your financial accounts, as an example. And we have cybersecurity and bioweapons. Generative AI can be used to hack websites to discover zero-day vulnerabilities unknown to developers in software and phones by automatically scanning millions of lines of code. And then we have bias and discrimination. Bias has been a problem with AI for years. You have privacy and data leaks. Surveillance capitalism takes human experiences as free raw material for translation into behavioral data declared as proprietary behavioral surplus, fed into artificial intelligence, and then sold to whoever wants to manipulate you. And then there's intellectual property taken without consent. AI regurgitates copyrighted material used without the consent of creators, like artists and writers and actors. A huge transfer of wealth from almost all of us to a tiny number of companies. And then you have over-reliance on unreliable systems in safety-critical applications, giving large learning models full sway over the world is a huge mistake waiting to happen. And then we have the environmental costs. AI companies train bigger and bigger models, which require astronomical amounts of energy, which has huge implications for the environment. Sightline Institute is an institute in the state of Washington, and they just published a study called A Climate Hawk's Guide to Northwest Data Centers. I read this study and was aghast at what I discovered in it. For instance, Oregon hosts the second most data center capacity in the United States. The most is from the state of Virginia. Notice that it's almost 6,000 megawatts of power from a 2024 record. And then Oregon is next down the list. We apparently have gotten heavily involved in this, but no state is free from being involved. It's just that we're, I guess, farther ahead at accumulating all these data centers. And then they published in this publication, they also had data centers consume a higher share of power in Oregon and Washington than in nearly all other states. Now, when you look at this graph, it's an estimate of the total state electricity consumed by data. And in the state of Virginia, 25% of their power is gone to data centers.
I don't know how to pause this.
Do you want me to build a fire, honey?
I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening here. Should I continue?
Yeah, keep playing it, Lloyd.
Okay. So anyway, where we are, or if you look at this again, Virginia is 25%. We're about half of Virginia, Oregon is, and then in Washington is at 5.7%. And in the report, this is what they had to say about it. Data centers powering AI can require up to 100 megawatts of electricity capacity, 4 to 10 times more than data centers of the not so distant past, translating to about as much electricity as a small city uses annually. AI fuels almost all of the anticipated growth in data centers' power demand. And this was a table that they provided, which is going to show you why it is that Umatilla County in Oregon was going to be given the opportunity to get an exemption from the law that's protected Oregon from nuclear power. If you look at this list of the 6 utilities, the first one is Umatilla Electric Cooperative. And notice that its share of new load growth in industrial and commercial customers is 44% of the total share, the total amount of energy that makes up industrial and commercial sectors in Oregon. This is a small cooperative. And look at the overall utility.
Rolled into one. But if the vote, it's girls. Girls, girls, girls.
Elvis's 11th film, Girls, 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 was the second to use what came to be called the...
I don't know what that's all about, but anyway.
Harry, please mute all.
Overall utility load growth change from 2013 to 2020.
Well, not Lloyd, but muting everybody was a good idea. Lloyd, unmute yourself. Lloyd, you're on mute.
I'm unmuted. Am I? Okay, so anyway, overall utility load growth in Oregon is come from the Umatilla Electric Co-op. 554% of overall load growth has come from that one little cooperative. And when you look down to Washington and you look at where Grant County Public Utility District is, it's at the bottom part of this graph, and Douglas County Utility District, again, it's the same thing. Microsoft, Amazon was driving the Umatilla Electric Cooperative load growth. Microsoft is driving the utility load growth in those two public utilities. And not only do we look at the low growth of electricity and the impact of data centers, but also we look at the data center impacts on water. And I found the first bit of information very impactful. Only 3% of Earth's water is fresh water, and only 0.5% of all water is accessible and safe for human consumption. And guess what? Data centers have impacts on water. A medium-sized data center uses about 110 million gallons of water annually compared to the water needs of 1,000 households. Larger facilities can consume up to 5 million gallons daily, equivalent to the usage of a town of 10,000 to 50,000 people. The direct on-site consumption ranks data centers among the top 10 water users in America's industrial and commercial sectors. One report estimated that U.S. data centers consume 449 million gallons of water per day and 163.7 billion gallons annually. That's water that's not being used for drinking. About 80% of the water withdrawn by data centers evaporates, with the remainder discharged as warm wastewater, which can overwhelm local treatment facilities. Data centers also have indirect water impacts. Power plants, which we're talking about, particularly those using fossil fuels, also contribute significantly to data center water impacts. In 2023, data centers' indirect water use from electricity was estimated at 211 billion gallons, averaging 1.2 gallons per kilowatt hour. Nuclear plants also have indirect water use impacts. Chip manufacturing.
Lloyd, excuse me, just real quick. It's almost 6 o'clock. It's 5:53, and we need to get on to our other speaker. So would you be able to wrap this up in like 5 minutes or so?
I can wrap it up now if you like.
Well, we have until 6:30, but we want to give David a chance to speak, and we also want to do Q&A.
Okay, well, I can briefly review with you Trump's executive orders, because this is a requiem for climate and democracy. The Trump administration is out to promote both nuclear power and AI data centers. They want this executive order, which was issued on April 8th, 2025, basically goes after, if you look at the last sentence, American energy dominance is threatened when state and local governments seek to regulate energy beyond their constitutional or statutory authorities. And there's another order for AI that uses similar language. What this is attempting to do is take away the power of state and local entities to regulate this. In fact, there's a legislation that's being proposed which would deny the states to regulate AI for 10 years. The next this came out the next day on April the 9th, is an executive order to unleash American energy. And of course, this one would force agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, Nuclear Regulatory Commission to put sunset provisions on their regulations so that those regulations would expire. And then who knows what happens, whether they can come back. And then there are the five more executive orders, all of which came out in May of 2025. And I really invite people to take a look at these executive orders. There, you can access them online. These five are really nuclear power on steroids. I would go into it more, but again, I don't want to deny David his opportunity to speak. And so I end with a couple of quotes. It's horrifying that we have to fight our own government to save the environment. That was Ansel Adams. And I added to save life itself. And this is a quote from a speech in 1854 of Chief Seattle, leader of the Duwamish and Suquamish people. The city of Seattle in Washington is named after him. All things are bound together, all things connect. Whatever happens to the earth happens to the children of the earth. Man did not weave the web of life, he is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. And that is the end of this presentation. Wonderful singer cartoon.
Lloyd and Cathy, both of you, that was an incredible presentation. You covered so much from the very beginning of the production of uranium and clear through to all of these regulations and the waste and the entire story. I wish we had time to do Q&A with you both right now, but let's just a second, let's move to David. But before I do that, because you spoke so much about AI, I would like to invite you and Cathy back and anyone here that's interested in AI, because our next Peace, Equity, and Climate Task Force presentation, which will be 9/11, September the 11th of September at the same time, is going to be completely focused on artificial intelligence. And I would appreciate your being here to add, to participate in that, Lloyd, at least at the Q&A level, because we've got a great speaker for that. But let's move to David Delk, and then when David is finished, I think his presentation is relatively short. Then we'll just do a Q&A for all three of you. So David has a bachelor's degree in sociology from Portland State University. He worked on his master's in labor history, and he founded the Portland chapter of Move to Amend. He has worked tirelessly to end corporate domination and to develop true democracy. He is the national co-chair of the Alliance for Democracy. He's a member of the First Unitarian Church, where he is active in the Economic Justice Action Group and the Peace Action Group. He is also on the board of Oregon's UU Voices for Justice, and he is currently chair of the Oregon Progressive Party. He is also on the board of UUJEC. We welcome you to the floor, David. Thank you for joining us.
Very good. Thank you very much. So can everybody hear me? First question.
We can hear.
You can hear. Wonderful. Good. I just put some stuff in the chat, including the link to a flyer called Doomsday Clock, 89 Seconds to Midnight. So I'm hoping that everyone either has already had a chance to download that or can do that while I'm talking, because as I go on, I'll be referring to it. So the beginning of my talk here, every year the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute issues a new yearbook on the condition of war and peace. The 2025 yearbook's opening sentence was less than encouraging for a future peaceful world. Quote, global security continued to deteriorate through 2024. Markers of this persistent deterioration included major armed conflicts in Ethiopia, Gaza, Myanmar, Sudan, and Ukraine. Regarding nuclear weapons, they said in part, the era of nuclear weapons reduction appears to have ended. Bilateral nuclear arms control between Russia and the U.S. Entered crisis some years ago and is now almost over. Revitalized national debates in Europe, the Mideast, and East Asia about nuclear status and strategy suggests that there is some potential for more states to join the nuclear club. The signs are that this new qualitative nuclear arms race is gearing up, and compared to the last one, the risks are likely to be more diverse and more serious. End quote. The nuclear club of 9 nations possesses over 12,000 nuclear weapons. The report continues. Overall, the number of nuclear warheads in the world continue to decline, with the U.S. and Russia dismantling retired warheads. However, the number of warheads being dismantled annually appears to be decreasing, and it seems likely that the rate at which retired warheads are dismantled will soon be outpaced by the rate at which new warheads enter global stockpiles. So the U.S. and Russia has about 90% of all nuclear weapons, with the U.S. having a total inventory of over 5,200 and Russia having almost 5,500. China has the third largest amount at 600, but that is a 100 warhead increase just in the past year. All of the nuclear nations have programs of modernizing their nuclear armaments. All of them increase the danger that a war will result, either by intention, by accident, or by error. These modernization programs are very expensive. While we don't know how much the other nations' programs will cost, we do have estimates for the United States because the Congressional Budget Office each year produces a report estimating the cost of modernization for the next 10-year period. Their most recent report states that during the 25-34 spending period, spending on modernization will be $946 billion. Yeah, almost $1 trillion. That will be over $90 billion a year. What is most alarming is that this figure is 25% more than the agency's prior 2023 report, which estimated expenses at $756 billion. So we can conclude from that 25% increase that the $1 million estimate, it will increase each year for the next 10-year periods. Part of this modernization effort includes nuclear submarines. The U.S. Navy hopes to add 2 or 3 Virginia-class subs annually until 2043, with a current goal of having 48 such subs. At the same time, the Navy is retiring Ohio-class subs and replacing them with Columbia-class subs, all nuclear powered, all with nuclear weapons included. Each of the planned 12 Columbia-style subs will have an estimated cost of $11 billion, with a total of about $132 billion for the entire program. Each of these subs will have 16 missile launch tubes. Each launch tube could be equipped with a Trident missile. Each missile is able to carry 128 nuclear warheads, each with a 475 kiloton yield. To quote the national interest, 475 kilotrons is, quote, enough firepower to potentially destroy any major city and most of the surrounding area in a 7-mile radius. By contrast, the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons. Recently, President Trump ordered 2 nuclear subs to be moved in reaction to statements by the former president of Russia. In response, Russia withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty signed in 1987. President Trump had already withdrawn the United States from that treaty in 2018. The last remaining nuclear arms control agreement, the New START Treaty, is set to expire on February 5th of next year, with no negotiations for a new treaty having yet begun. All of this suggests that a new nuclear arms race has begun or will begin, this time also including China. And with President Trump having withdrawn American protection of our allies, countries around the world are beginning to seriously consider developing their own nuclear weapons. Nations considering this option include Germany, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and Japan. If the American people were asked what their federal spending priorities are, I would guess that not a single one would say modernization of nuclear weapons. Fund our schools and libraries, fund healthcare, fund infrastructure, address the climate crisis, more teachers and healthcare providers, raise wages, provide daily lunches and dinners in our schools, provide affordable housing. These are most likely to be talked about, but not nuclear weapons. So if modernization of nuclear weapons is not a top priority for the American people, why is the federal government moving forward on it? The major reason is that the federal government ignores the people's priorities is that the military-industrial complex provides a major source of funds to political campaigns, especially for members of the Senate and House Armed Services Committees. In figures released by Open Secrets, in 2022, 15 defense contractors contributed more than $2.3 million just to the House Armed Services Committee members. Among those companies, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, BAE Systems, Boeing, and more. There's just not just members of the House Armed Services Committee that benefit from defense sector political contributions. During the 22 election cycle, members of the Senate Armed Services Committee received $1.2 million. And naturally, you didn't have to be a member of those committees to receive such political contributions. In fact, major defense contractors still had lots of money to spread among the other members of both the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans. So what do we do? How do we respond to this? So this is where I'm hopefully going to ask you to look at that flyer that I indicated in the chat. It's the flyer is called a Doomsday Clock, 89 Seconds to Midnight. 5 bills are listed there, which we need to support, push for with all our might in order to put some limits on the development and use of nuclear weapons. This flyer can also be used as a conversation starter in our work to build a new anti-nuclear movement. It can also be used as content for contacting your representative or your senators to gain their support. Take it with you to town halls. Let our elected leaders know that the dangers of nuclear weapons is an issue that we need to address. It cannot be ignored. If you want to use the flyer as is with the logos of the 2 social action groups of the First Unitarian Church here in Portland, please do so. However, if you feel that it would be more useful with your own logos on it, let me know and send a copy of the logo and I will modify the flyer. My email address is at the bottom of that insert I put into the chat. The first bill is the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act of 2025, H.R. 1888. This was introduced into the House with 9 co-sponsors. 9 co-sponsors out of 435 members of the House. We have a lot of work to do to get those other representatives to co-sponsor this bill. A similar bill is in the Senate, not identical, but with the same purpose. Bill number is S.R. 323. It was introduced by Senators Markey, Merkley, Sanders, Van Hollen, and Walsh. That is 5 senators out of 100. Lots of work can be done to get more senators signed on as co-sponsors. Both of these bills establish no requirement that the president or the executive branch actually do anything. Instead, these bills are more along the lines of wishes. In the words of the bill, it is, quote, the sense of the Congress that the United States should provide leadership by signing the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And then it goes on to state that what will be the results of signing. H.R. 1888 then goes on to state, beginning on the date on which the president certifies to Congress that all countries possessing nuclear weapons have begun the verifiable and irreversible elimination of such weapons under the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the president shall transfer the funding appropriated for nuclear weapons programs to be used for addressing the climate crisis, addressing human and infrastructure needs such as healthcare, housing, education, agriculture, and environmental restitution. Much the same can be said for H.R. 317, urging the United States to lead the world back from the brink of nuclear war and halt and reverse the nuclear arms race. This bill is filled with whereas clauses, which detail reasons why the U.S. needs to lead the world back from the brink. Included in these clauses is this: whereas on July 7, 2017, 122 nations in the United Nations voted to adopt the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which prohibits the possession, use, testing, stationing, or transfer of nuclear weapons and creates an important legal framework for the elimination of all nuclear weapons, and is entered into force January 22, 2021. Entered into force means that this treaty is now international law. Please note that while this is now international law, none of the nuclear powers have signed the treaty. Part of our mission needs to be to generate the demand that the U.S. sign and ratify this treaty. Moving on, S-192 in the Senate is an identical bill to the House's H.R. 669. The bill titles are Restricting First Use of Nuclear Weapons Act of 2025. These bills are not a sense of the Senate bill, but have specific requirements attached to them. The purpose of the bills is clear in the title: to not allow the United States to use nuclear weapons in a first strike capacity. Nuclear weapons could only be used in response to being attacked by nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction. And only after a declaration of war by Congress. Currently, India and China have no first use policies in place. These bills would add the United States to that very short list. The Declaration of Policy section on these bills declares, it is the policy of the United States that no first use nuclear strike shall be conducted absent a declaration of war by Congress. Note that Congress's last declared war was the Second World War. No later wars have ever been declared since by Congress. There are currently 6 co-sponsors in the Senate and 21 in the House. So lots of work to be done to get these bills enacted, or even just to get more co-sponsors. So this flyer gives us our marching orders in order to further the goals of an anti-nuclear weapons movement. Let's make the calls. Let's write the emails and the letters. Let's call our representatives and senators asking for the support for each of these bills. Contact other like-minded organizations, whether religious or not. Let's build the interpersonal relations around this issue and activate a new anti-nuclear weapons movement. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was absolutely excellent. We're at 6:15. I'd like to invite David and Lloyd and Cathy to put their emails in the chat if they would like to, in case people don't have time to get their questions answered. And on the East Coast, it's much later than it is on the West Coast. So I don't know that anybody wants to go over here. But let's open it up to Q&A for any of the 3 of our speakers. I'm scrolling through to see if there's any hands raised. If I miss anybody, please call it to my attention.
There's Diane.
Okay, Diane.
Hi. Lloyd, on the AI thing, isn't there some company in China that does AI with a lot less energy? And why are we just blindly going ahead? I don't, you can't probably answer that, but why not force some energy efficiency into the mix?
Well, the unfortunate reality that we are confronting with leadership in our country and other countries is it's competition over cooperation. And because of the fact that we are competing against other countries, and I guess I should step back and say, yes, there is a Chinese company, I can't remember the name of it right now, that has developed a AI model that consumes much less energy than the large learning models that we have used by AI proponents in this country. But, competition is not going to resolve the problems of nuclear weapons. It's not going to resolve the problems of artificial intelligence. It's not going, I think, to resolve the problems of nuclear power. It hasn't done that. If we are serious about doing something about catastrophic climate change, we've got to change the way that we live and the way that we live with each other. That's really what it comes down to. And I would like to think that that can happen, but under the current administration, I don't see much hope for it. I think David's right. What we have to do is we have to get out there, join together, and demand accountability, because it's not going to be provided to us by the government. It's going to be provided by us, demanding that the government meet our needs.
There are two more questions in the queue. Dick Burkhart, followed by Sue Craig.
Yeah, Lloyd, I'd heard that China already has one or more small nuclear reactors. Do you know anything about those, how they're operating? Does that tell us anything?
China does have one, as I understand it, small modular nuclear reactor. I'm not up on exactly what its operating experience has been, but my understanding of what little I've read is that it's not been as successful as it was originally projected. So, and maybe Cathy knows about this as well, because Cathy's always sharing with me the latest news about what's going on in the world, and I'm doing my best to try and keep up with it all, but I don't know everything.
Yeah, the only information I've run across is consistently that the either one or two, I can't remember which, don't operate at the level of capacity that
Right.
they're when people say, oh, China has them, they need to understand that they're not operating effectively or with significant capacity.
I mean, you have to keep in mind that if we're going to really address the problems of climate change, nuclear power is not going to do that for us. We need to be making changes now in the way that we live and in the way we provide energy. That needs to happen now. We need to operate from a level of cooperation that I guess could only come close to maybe what's happened in wartime. And I'd like to think that maybe that doesn't have to happen here. We really have an existential crisis that we need to confront together.
We have two. Let's see, Sue, you're next, and followed by Gary Anderson.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you all three for your incredible information. And Lloyd and Cathy, if you have a fact sheet. I've got some of your stuff, but if you had that and could make it available to us when we go to our legislators, which I did quite a bit last year, and my legislators are wonderful. It's a couple of the other ones that are driving me nuts on the state level. Okay, and David, you're absolutely right. And I am the president of Oregon UU Voices for Justice, and I'm finding that in North Carolina, in their sons group, they have joined. I don't know how they did this, and I'm going to get all the information on it. But they joined with a whole bunch of other churches and faith groups all over North Carolina. Oh my gosh. And they were able, on that terrible bill that was passed, they sent their state senator and maybe several others, maybe several senators, but they were able to make a phone call every 3 minutes from somebody in their state for 48 hours to tell this man, do not vote for this. And he went ahead and voted for it anyway. And he's the one that said, I voted for it, but I'm not going to run for office anymore. So we can make a difference, but we've all got to get together on this. And Oregon UU Voices for Justice is going to work on this. And if you are in states that have a sons group, get them busy. And there are a lot of ways we can join. I'm in Indivisible, and they are incredible. We had 220,000 people on the Zoom meeting last night. So we've got to get together, and we've got to do a lot of really important stuff. And thank you for all this information. It's marvelous. And David, I will get your stuff from you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Gary, you're next, and then Catherine. Kathy has a question.
If I could take a moment, though, to respond
Oh,
to
sure.
Sue. I just wanted to let Sue know, you asked if we have information. We do have information, but I need to let you know that right now I'm in the process, Cathy and I are in the process of reviving or expanding our Oregon Conservancy Foundation resource guide, which addresses nuclear but does not address AI. And this legislative session that we were in this year has been a big turning point in my life, because we have not come across the AI issue in the way that we are now, and the way that it's driving small modular nuclear reactors.
Mm-hmm.
Also reminds me of how the nuclear industry, who has like a chameleon, changed its colors. It doesn't talk much about climate change because, Trump believes climate change is a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they want to be in good graces with the master. And so now what they're heavily involved in is data centers. That's where they're really excited that they've got a new way to bring a resurgence to the need for data centers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you both. Gary, I want to go to you in just a second. I want to call out some gratitude here to Mona Lee and Dick Burkhart. They've been calling for a webinar like this for some time. And Gary, you have done so much in promoting it. Go ahead with your question. Thank you, Gary.
Hi, thank you. Two things. I think, Catherine, Fukushima remediation, you had an estimated remediation cost with many, many billions. If you remember what that was, I'd appreciate it. And then I had a different question to Lloyd about waste storage.
It was 600 million is the estimate. It's still happening. Yeah.
600 billion with a B.
Billion, B with a
okay,
B.
That's
yes.
what I wrote down, but my brain could not comprehend. Okay,
no.
It is. All right. So back to on the nuclear waste storage, Lloyd, you point out about governments come and governments go, any commitment that Carthage might have made, et cetera. There's nobody going to be around for perpetual care of waste. Can you, I worked in 1990, I was working at Rocky Flats, they're remediating that site. and many of that waste went to Hanford. In 1990, it was part of a DOE enforcement action at Hanford Nuclear Works, and it was appalling. The systems were not in place to do it right. Speaking from my perspective as a remedial action expert or reasonably competent, there was rusting barrels of low-level wastes, and anyway, so it's truly a disaster. So a question is, if you don't, we shouldn't pick up something until we know how we're going to set it down, and we don't know how to set this darn stuff down. What is a believable time frame? Is it tens of millions of years for, say, residue from nuclear power to degrade to the point approaching background? Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, dozens of millions. How long? I mean, I know there's no human institution that's going to last that many million years, but what's really a time frame in conversations like to be able to say some bunch of millions of years to get to background? What, do you have a thought?
Well, when you fission uranium atoms, it splits. When you split a uranium atom, it creates a whole bunch of new radioactive isotopes or new atoms. And those atoms each have their own half-life. Some of them will decay out in a shorter period of time than others. For example, I think of the half-life of plutonium, which, if my memory is correct, is about 29,000 years. In other words, if you had a handful of plutonium in your hands, if you waited 29,000 years, half of it would have transformed itself into whatever decay product takes place as it releases its energy.
But it might be we need 30 half-lives to get to.
Oh, it's a number of
background.
half-lives. It
Yeah.
is, and it's way beyond the time frame that you and I are operating in. I have, as I said before, looking at the waste disposal problem reminds me of that Pete Seeger song, "Waist deep in the deep, muddy, and the big fool said push on." We have been producing nuclear waste, even though we had no way of dealing with them ultimately, or removing them from the environment in such a way that they don't present more hazards for future generations. I mean, it's basically, I, you know, I keep quotes. I don't happen to have my quotes in front of me right at the moment, but E.F. Shoemaker, who wrote the book Small is Beautiful, he was an economist, um, castigated the nuclear industry for doing this. That we would foist on future generations the problems that future generations will not derive any benefit from, none. It's immoral, I think, what's been going on, and all because, again, we're in this kind of race to outperform everybody else in the world and somehow, or be dominant. That's a big word for Trump. He uses dominant a lot. Anyway, I think you all know and see where we're going. I'm hoping that somehow we can change ourselves in time to save ourselves, and also at the same time have some kind of responsibility towards those who are going to come after us.
So I just wanted to point out that I put into the chat the Vogel Truth Report, which came out from the two nuclear power plants in Georgia that were the first to be coming online in 2 years. It includes it's an updated version of a report that talks about impacts to ratepayers. It has an introductory section that addresses the confluence with AI and data centers, and it also has a section about myths of nuclear energy, and they're essentially trying to let people know why not to do this. And even though people think of them as big reactors, they were created with modular intent so that some of the parts of those reactors would come out of factories, and they had massive cost overruns. Think of the Boeing effect. And just there's a link in the chat about that report. It's well worth reading.
Yeah, think about
ladies
the
and
Boeing
gentlemen,
effect for sure.
we are at 6. We are at our end time. I want to ask Terry. Terry, we have one more hand raised. Do we have time for one more question, or shall we wrap it up? You're muted.
I think John should talk.
Okay, all right. After John, that'll be our last question. Thank you all
Okay.
so much for joining us.
And John needs
somebody
to
who has gone
unmute.
to the last three COPs, I will tell you, they are pushing nuclear energy very, very hard as a solution to climate. Okay, go ahead, John.
You're muted.
While John
You're
gets
muted.
on
You
mute,
have to unmute.
Kathy, are you sure
Yes,
that
there it is. Okay,
There you go.
sorry. I unmuted me.
Good.
Now my wife would love to have me muted, but never mind that. My understanding is that vitrification is a way to handle nuclear waste. When I bring that up to experts, they just look glassy-eyed, no pun intended. They just look at me and don't say anything about that. I haven't heard anything for 30 years about vitrification, but my understanding is that if you take molten glass and then mix it with ground up nuclear waste and then put that into a shell of steel, that it'll last for 500,000 years or something. And if it should break, the only the only radiation that would be released is at the break itself. The rest of the nuclear waste would be enclosed in glass that has lead in it. Does anybody know anything about vitrification as a way of handling nuclear waste?
I would recommend a book to you. There's a book called Atomic Days, and there's a subtitle to it, which I can't remember right at the moment, by Joshua Frank. And what it is it's a story of Hanford, because Hanford, by the way, has been pursuing vitrification. And it's a horror story, because what's been happening is they've been having nothing but technical problems, redesign problems. They've not been able to get the vitrification plant that they've already spent billions of dollars on to function. I highly recommend the book. You should take a look at it. Because again, this industry is very good at making promises about how things are going to work in the future. But the fact of the matter is we inherit the realities, and the realities have not been what the promises that have been made, including vitrification.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our program. If you want to unmute and give our fine speakers a round of applause, I think that would be appropriate. Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Just
Very
really,
good,
really
everyone.
amazing.
Thanks, you guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you.